For the rest of her life, she said nothing. She had stood beside Nikola Tesla through the work he never wrote down, witnessing the experiments he conducted in secret. One night, she saw something he ordered her never to reveal, and she kept that promise. She never told the reporters who searched for answers, nor the men who later arrived and took everything else. She carried the secret through Tesla's financial ruin, his death, and into her own final years. Then, with almost no time left, Tesla's assistant finally spoke about the mystery she had guarded for decades. What she claimed should not have been possible. It centered on the unfinished Wardenclyffe Tower. Nikola Tesla gave the world alternating current and transformed modern electricity. But according to this account, his greatest discovery was not the one that powered cities. Instead, it was something he glimpsed during a late-night experiment, chose to bury, and carried with him to the grave. The legend says only one other person ever knew the truth: the young engineer who worked at his side and remained silent until the end of her life. To understand what she claimed to have witnessed, the story returns to a strange structure rising from the farmland on Long Island's North Shore. On the open fields of Shoreham, Tesla built Wardenclyffe Tower, a towering wooden structure nearly 187 feet tall, crowned with an enormous metal dome. Funded by J.P. Morgan, Tesla presented the project as a wireless telegraphy system capable of sending messages through the air without wires. While that was true, it was only part of his vision. Tesla's real ambition was far greater: transmitting electrical power itself through the earth so that anyone, anywhere, could access free energy with the proper receiver. According to the assistant's account, the idea was both elegant and unsettling. If the tower could resonate with the Earth's natural electrical field, energy could travel through the planet itself, turning the Earth into one massive conductor. She claimed that during an early test, lamps placed miles away illuminated without any physical connection to a power source, a demonstration that left some observers impressed and others deeply alarmed. The story claims everything changed on a spring night in 1903, long after midnight, when a nearby town had gone completely dark. Every window was black, every street deserted, and inside Wardenclyffe Tower only 2 people remained awake. There were no reporters, no investors, and no written record of what they were about to attempt. Tesla had deliberately chosen this night to operate the tower at full power for the very first time, without anyone present to stop him. He carefully inspected the grounding system first, checking a network of iron pipes driven deep into the earth until they reached the water table, creating what he believed was a direct connection with the planet itself. Slowly examining every connection, he approached the main switch, nodded quietly to his assistant, and pulled the lever. Almost immediately, a deep hum filled the tower. It was first felt through the floor before it could be clearly heard. The massive copper coils began to sing as energy surged through them, the sound growing into something that no longer seemed mechanical, as though the entire structure had awakened. The floor trembled beneath their feet. The air became thick with static electricity. The fine hairs on her arms stood upright, and bright sparks crawled across the metal rails like living creatures. Then the top of the tower erupted with a brilliant white-blue arc that shot into the sky like a bolt of lightning frozen in place, illuminating the darkness with an unnatural glow. Witnesses miles away would later claim the night sky shone as brightly as dawn. According to her account, the wonder quickly turned into fear. Along the shoreline, buildings with no electrical wires connected to them suddenly lit up, lamps glowing inside empty homes as if invisible hands had switched them on. Tesla remained perfectly still, quietly whispering calculations under his breath until the gauges climbed beyond their highest markings and continued rising. Telegraph stations across Long Island began failing one after another as the energy surged back through the ground faster than the system could safely release it. Smoke started rising near one of the generators. She called out Tesla's name, but he was already rushing toward the main control lever. With one powerful pull, he shut the entire system down. Instantly, the hum disappeared, the brilliant electrical arc vanished, and a heavy silence settled over the tower. Standing with one hand still resting on the lever, Tesla quietly whispered, "It works." According to her later recollection, the emotion in his voice was not excitement or triumph. It was fear. As they locked the control room, she glanced toward the dark tree line beyond the fence and noticed several silent figures standing motionless at the edge of the property. Dressed in plain dark clothing with no badges or identifying marks, they neither approached nor left. They simply watched. By the early hours of the morning, they had disappeared, but according to the story, news of the night's events had already reached influential people before sunrise. Soon afterward, a hand-delivered letter arrived from one of J.P. Morgan's representatives. Rather than congratulating Tesla, the letter warned him about what it described as uncontrolled power dissemination. Beneath the formal language, the message was clear. Tesla's machine was transmitting energy in a way that could not be measured, metered, or sold. Morgan, according to the account, had not invested in a tower designed to provide free electricity to the world. Such a machine would not simply disrupt a few companies. It could undermine the entire business of selling electrical power. The assistant later came to believe the mysterious men at the fence were no coincidence, and that representatives of multiple governments had been monitoring Tesla's work. What he had built was no longer viewed as an impressive invention, but as a potential threat. Tesla had intended to offer humanity a gift, yet the world, she believed, was unwilling to embrace such a radical change. The collapse came quickly. Within days, Morgan withdrew his financial support without discussion or negotiation. Workers disappeared, supplies stopped arriving, and the great tower at Shoreham slowly began to fall into decline. Soon afterward, officials started appearing, claiming to conduct safety inspections or investigate patent matters. However, the assistant insisted these visits felt more like searches than inspections. Unmarked men moved confidently through restricted areas as though no one had the authority to question them. Crates containing instruments were quietly removed, while notebooks and blueprints explaining the tower's operation vanished without receipts, announcements, or any official acknowledgement. According to her recollections, Tesla was never the same after those events. He became distant, withdrawn, and never again attempted another project on the scale of Wardenclyffe. Near the end of his life, when she asked whether he would ever rebuild or reactivate the tower, he reportedly replied that they had stopped him not because the experiment had failed, but because it had succeeded. He spoke without bitterness, only with the exhaustion of someone who had accepted what had happened. Wardenclyffe Tower was eventually abandoned, dismantled, and sold for scrap, while Tesla made no effort to save it. Yet, according to the story, the strangest chapter was still to come, one that would begin only after Tesla's death. Inside the tower, only two people were awake. No reporters, no investors, and no written record of what they were about to attempt. Tesla had deliberately chosen that night to run Wardenclyffe at full power for the very first time without anyone present to stop him. He began by carefully inspecting the grounding system, a network of iron pipes driven deep into the earth until they reached the water table, giving the tower what he believed was a direct connection with the planet itself. He checked every connection slowly, almost as if he feared what might happen next. Then he rested his hand on the main switch, nodded to his assistant, and pulled the lever. A low hum filled the air almost instantly. It was something that could be felt before it could be heard, a vibration rising through the soles of their shoes. The massive copper coils began to sing as power surged through them, the sound growing into something that no longer seemed mechanical, but almost alive, as though the tower itself had awakened. The floor trembled, static electricity thickened the air, the fine hairs on her arms stood upright, and blue sparks crawled along the metal rails like living creatures. Suddenly, the top of the tower unleashed a brilliant white-blue arc that shot into the night sky, holding steady like a bolt of lightning frozen in place. People miles away would later claim that the darkness briefly turned into daylight, a false dawn appearing in the early hours of the morning. But according to her account, the miracle quickly became frightening. Buildings along the distant shoreline, with no wires connected to them, supposedly began glowing as lamps flickered to life inside empty rooms. Tesla remained perfectly still, whispering calculations under his breath, until the instruments suddenly exceeded every safe limit. The needles on his gauges climbed beyond their highest markings and refused to stop. Telegraph stations across Long Island reportedly fell silent one after another as the energy surged back through the ground faster than the system could control. Smoke began rising near one of the generators. His assistant shouted his name, but Tesla had already rushed toward the main control lever. With one powerful pull, he shut the entire system down. The humming vanished instantly, the great electrical arc disappeared, and a heavy silence settled over the tower. Tesla kept his hand on the lever for several moments before quietly saying, "It works." Yet according to his assistant, there was no excitement in his voice, only fear. He immediately ordered her never to tell anyone what had happened. As they locked the control room and prepared to leave, she glanced toward the dark tree line beyond the fence and noticed several silent figures standing motionless in the darkness, watching the tower without saying a single word. By the next morning, without a single newspaper reporting the event, word of what had happened had already reached powerful people behind closed doors. Soon after, a letter arrived, hand-delivered by one of J.P. Morgan's own representatives. There were no congratulations or praise, only a cold warning about what it described as uncontrolled power dissemination. Beneath the formal language, the message was clear. Tesla's machine was transmitting energy in a way that could not be measured, metered, or sold. Morgan had never invested in a project that would allow the world to receive electricity for free. A machine capable of distributing unlimited power would not simply hurt a few businesses. It would destroy the entire industry built on selling electricity. According to the assistant's account, she eventually came to believe that the mysterious men standing outside the fence had not been ordinary observers at all. She suspected that agents representing multiple governments had been monitoring Tesla's work for some time, and that his invention was no longer viewed as an extraordinary scientific breakthrough, but as a dangerous threat. Tesla himself had never intended to challenge governments or industries. His goal had always been to give humanity a gift, but the world was unwilling to surrender control over energy. From that moment, everything began to collapse. Within days, Morgan withdrew his financial support without offering Tesla another meeting or a second chance. Workers disappeared almost overnight, construction stopped, supplies no longer arrived at the site, and the massive Wardenclyffe Tower slowly fell into decline. Soon afterward, a new wave of visitors began arriving. Officials claimed they were conducting safety inspections or reviewing patent matters. But according to her memories, their behavior felt nothing like routine investigations. Unmarked men walked confidently through restricted areas as though they already had complete authority. They removed crates of equipment, loaded them onto waiting trucks, and quietly took away notebooks, blueprints, and technical documents explaining how the tower actually worked. No receipts were issued, no public announcements were made, and no one ever admitted taking a single page. After those events, Tesla was never the same. He became increasingly quiet and withdrawn, and he never again attempted another project on the scale of Wardenclyffe. Years later, when his assistant asked whether he would ever rebuild the tower, he gave an answer she never forgot. He told her they had stopped him not because the experiment had failed, but because it had succeeded. According to her, he spoke without anger or bitterness, only with the exhausted acceptance of a man who understood that his greatest achievement would never be allowed to change the world. Eventually, the tower itself was abandoned, dismantled, and sold for scrap, while Tesla stood by without trying to save it. Yet, as strange as that story was, she believed the most mysterious chapter had not even begun. It would unfold only after Tesla's death, when others came to claim everything he had left behind. When Nikola Tesla died alone in room 3327 of New York's New Yorker Hotel in January 1943, his fortune had long since disappeared, his health had declined, and nearly everything he owned had been packed in locked trunks and filing cabinets filled with decades of research. According to the story, officials arrived almost immediately after his death. Not just local police, but representatives from the Office of Alien Property, a wartime agency responsible for taking control of the property of foreign nationals. What makes this detail so unusual is that Tesla had become a United States citizen in 1891, meaning he should not have fallen under that agency's authority. Nevertheless, they sealed his hotel room and removed everything. Witnesses reportedly watched as trunk after trunk was carried away under guard, taking with them thousands of pages of notebooks, drawings, letters, and technical documents that vanished from public view. Among the materials said to have been confiscated were plans for Teleforce, the device newspapers later nicknamed the Death Ray, a proposed beam of charged particles that Tesla claimed could destroy aircraft from hundreds of miles away. Tesla himself never described it as an offensive weapon, but rather as a defensive shield powerful enough to make war impossible. Much of this material remained classified after his death, and according to the story, a significant portion has never been fully released. Officials later claimed that engineers examined the documents and found nothing of military importance, yet many of the files remained locked away for years. If the research truly had no value, the story asks, why was so much effort made to keep it hidden? The narrative then returns to Tesla's loyal assistant, the woman who claimed she had witnessed the Wardenclyffe experiment firsthand. She remained silent for decades through the collapse of Tesla's career, the seizure of his life's work, and the gradual disappearance of nearly everything connected to the tower. Only near the end of her own life, sometime during the 1950s, did she reportedly record her memories, speaking in an unsteady voice about the unforgettable night when she believed the sky itself had caught fire. Over time, the recording, if it truly existed, became part of legend rather than accepted history. As the years passed, others added new claims to the story, suggesting mysterious radio signals were detected along the coast that night or that faint electrical pulses still linger beneath the soil at Shoreham. The narrator acknowledges that none of those claims can be verified and that they belong to folklore rather than documented fact. What remains undeniable within the story, however, is that Tesla genuinely built the Wardenclyffe Tower to pursue wireless power transmission, that financier J.P. Morgan funded the project before abruptly withdrawing his support, and that after Tesla's death, his research materials were seized by government officials and much of them remained hidden from public view for years. Whether the legends surrounding the tower are true or not, the story ends by asking a final question. Was Tesla on the edge of a breakthrough the world was not prepared to accept, or has history simply transformed an unfinished dream into one of its greatest mysteries? The story concludes by asking what people truly believe happened inside the Wardenclyffe Tower. Was Nikola Tesla standing on the edge of a scientific breakthrough so revolutionary that it frightened the governments and powerful businessmen of his era? Had he really discovered a way to transmit electricity freely across the Earth? Or was he simply a brilliant inventor whose ambitions reached beyond what technology of the time could achieve? The narrator suggests that perhaps the enduring mystery exists because people want to believe that somewhere in Tesla's unfinished work lies a lost discovery